So Gilbert Ryle has an objection to Ryle, which says not so much that he's wrong about the relation between the mind and the body, but that he's worse than wrong because he's confused, that Descartes is confused, that he's got a misconception about the nature of the mind, that it's not a kind of substance at all, but rather having a mind, more precisely Ryle would prefer to say being intelligent, is a matter of how you behave or are disposed to behave. Now, first point I want to make by way of assessing Ryle himself is that Ryle is often classified as a behaviorist, and in your Intro to Psychology and other courses that might discuss the mind in one form or another, behaviorism is often described as an historical curiosity, but not one that many contemporary researchers take very seriously. Now, that might be an accurate characterization of other types of behaviorism, such as that propounded by Watson, Skinner, and others, according to whom either positing the mind, positing mental phenomena was bad science, or positing mental phenomena was unnecessary and unlikely to produce testable scientific hypotheses. Ryle's not interested in formulating a scientific psychology, though. He's more interested in helping us get a clear sense of our common sense notion of mentality. So just to call Ryle a behaviorist is not itself to come up with a decisive objection to his view. If you want to understand where, if anywhere, Ryle's behaviorism falls short, just calling it a form of behaviorism is not going to do that. We need to figure out, if anything, where Ryle might go wrong. Now, a couple questions you might have in mind as you think about that. First of all, Ryle's objecting to the very formulation of the mind-body problem. In answer to the question, what kinds of things are minds, Ryle's not saying, he's certainly not accepting dualism, but he's also not accepting materialism. He's not accepting the claim that minds are physical things, because for Ryle that would be committing him to the view that minds are things, that they're substances, and he thinks that's confused, as we said. For Ryle, rather, the whole question concerning the mind-body problem, what kinds of things exist in the most fundamental sense, is for him a confused question. Don't think of minds as substances at all, but rather as our tendency to behave in more or less intelligent ways. But you might ask whether that's in fact right. Is it worth considering the recent developments in the neurosciences that suggest that mental phenomena are identical with things that happen in the central nervous system? Every other week one can find in a scientific publication or a high-level newspaper reports about neuroscientists finding, for example, the neural location of musical ability, the neural location of certain visual experiences, the neural location of certain emotional phenomena. And as we proceed further into the neural basis for mentality, that suggests that perhaps thinking just is a process in the central nervous system. Notice, first of all, however, that it's one thing to find a correlation between neural phenomena and mental phenomena, and quite another thing to find that those two things are identical. And if you're a materialist and want to espouse your materialism as an objection to Ryle's rejection of that whole position, that's fine, but notice that it will be worthwhile pointing out that your position goes beyond just accepting a correlation between neural and mental phenomena and holding instead that the two actually are the same. So it's one thing to say, and this is plausible, that lightning is correlated with electrical discharge, and it's another thing, and this is borne out in a very good hypothesis too, that lightning just is electrical discharge. So too, it's one thing to say that thinking is correlated with neural processes. It's another thing, a stronger claim, and one that perhaps we don't yet know confidently to be able to assert, that thinking just is a neural process. If you want to make that stronger claim, you're welcome to do so, but keep in mind that requires some argument. It's not something that we can infer just from the correlation claim. If we were to do so, that would be something akin to a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. The inference itself cannot be made in a way that's logically valid. The conclusion might still be true, but if it is, you need to explain why you think it is instead of just asserting it. First point. Second point, this is more of a perhaps direct objection to Ryle's position. Think about mentality that seems to occur in a way that's disassociated with any behavior or disposition to behavior. Suppose you just had a major operation during which you got a general anesthetic and you just woke up, but you're in a completely dark room and you're not able to move any of your muscles yet. You're breathing, so your autonomic nervous system is working fine, but you don't feel like you're able to move any of your body parts, even blink your eyes. Your eyes are closed. Now, you might still at that point be able to think. You might ask yourself, where am I? You might wonder, what time is it? You might think, I'm getting a little bit hungry. You might wonder to yourself, I wonder if anybody knows where I am, whether I'm here, that I'm awake, etc. What happens if something goes wrong? Do I have a way of calling a nurse, etc.? All those thoughts might run through your head. Those are thoughts. Those are mental phenomena that are not themselves now, it seems, being manifested or expressed in behavior. But at the same time, it seems like it's not clear what it means to say you're disposed to behave in a certain way by virtue of having the thoughts that you do. So one thing you might think about by way of a potential challenge to Raoult's position is, even taking the measure of his perhaps more sophisticated form of behaviorism as compared to those of, for instance, Watson and Skinner, you might ask yourself, can Raoult's even more sophisticated form of behaviorism acknowledge such facts as lying awake in your hospital bed, recovering from a general anesthetic, being totally emotionless, and still having thoughts? Those are thoughts that seem not to be connected in any direct way with behavior, so how can Raoult make sense of them? In fact, you might even consider a tougher objection to Raoult the phenomenon known as locked-in syndrome. In locked-in syndrome, you are, to a greater or lesser extent, paralyzed all the way with all your muscles. In some cases, patients with locked-in are able to move their eyelids, in other cases not. Let's suppose that you're not even able to move your eyelids, so not a single muscle is one that you're capable of moving. If someone's locked-in syndrome, presumably at least for a short period of time, they're going to be able, I would expect, to have thoughts, to think things, to wonder, to form mental images, to feel emotions, to feel frustration, longing, regret, presumably some pain as well. Those are mental phenomena. Now it seems even more severe, a more severe distinction, fissure between their thinking and their behavior and their dispositions thereto. The phenomenon of extreme locked-in syndrome looks like it's a potential challenge to Raoult. So you would do well to think about how deep a challenge is this? Does this refute Raoult's position, or is something like a more sophisticated version of Raoult's position capable of responding to and acknowledging this phenomenon without having to give up the spirit of his version of behaviorism and thereby the spirit of his objection to and resistance against the dualistic heritage that he wants to respond to, going all the way back to Descartes?